programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution.radio. I am your host, Diamond, from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, and joining us today is my lovely partner and co-host, Leah Shaper.
Hello.
Welcome. Great show today. We're going to be talking about a topic that many people have on their minds, the ongoing magnetic excursion. And the title of the show is Magnetic Excursions, Mass Extinctions, and Evolutionary Leaps.
A la Robert Felix.
Yes, God rest his soul. We'll get to his little tribute a little later in the show. But what can we discuss in the next hour? We're going to go over what these magnetic excursions are, what we know about them, which is actually very little, and what happens during them, and how the science has rolled out since the first paper in the early 1970s, which correlated extinctions of radiolaria with magnetic reversals, and to where we got to today with 15 years ago, Robert Felix writing the book, Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, and a paper coming out showing that the Lechamp magnetic excursion was a mass extinction event, and explaining why that is. What happens during these events is very bad things happen to the Earth because more and more radiation come in. We'll get to the specifics on that as we move through the program. First, we're going to start sharing the screen. Let me know when you can see the screen.
See.
Okay, so
is your speaker real close to your mic?
No.
Oh. I'm echoing for some reason. Okay.
You
anyway,
are?
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me just turn them for you.
It could be me.
So I asked AI a little bit about what's going on. I said, when will the poles flip? That's simple. And it said scientists can't predict when Earth's magnetic poles will flip, but some say it could happen in the 2030s. These reversals. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's not very far away.
Right. These reversals are random and can occur anywhere from 10,000 to 50 million years, with the last one happening 780,000 years ago. When the poles flip, what currently north becomes south and vice versa. Now, Earth's magnetic field has been weakening over the past few thousand years, and if it decays enough, what happens is it could collapse and cause the poles to flip. That is not normally what happens, though. What normally happens is an excursion, the poles near the flipping point, but they bounce back. And so what we have is many more excursions in between these reversals. And in fact, we've had dozens of excursions since the last reversal 780,000 years ago, each of which corresponds to a mass extinction and evolutionary leaps as we move through the geologic record. Now,
I'm a little bit confused about one thing, and maybe you can clear this up for me and the rest of the audience. So the Lechamp is only considered an excursion, even though there was actually a polarity flip?
Some scientists claim there was a polarity flip for a short period of time, but it went back to the normal polarity.
Right, which is what this paper that we're going to review, that's the conclusion that they reach from their data, is that there's a brief period of polarity reversal that then quickly flips back.
Now, that might be an artifact of A, not being around 41,500 years ago, and B, some of the reconstructions don't show polarity reversal, but what they show is 4 or 5 poles showing up at the same time all over the globe, not necessarily north and south flipping. So that type of field strength confusion could show a polarity reversal. And we're going to look at the World magnetic model map, and you can see how that's possible when we look at the field strength of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're spinning north and south pole on this rotational pole, the north and south poles are almost never near the rotational poles.
Sure.
And they're both on one side, one hemisphere currently, which is very bizarre. So as the poles move towards the equator during these excursions, it gets so weak that other poles spontaneously pop up. And if you had compasses all over the world, there would be no consensus on where the North Magnetic Pole would be. They would be all over the place.
Right. And with those multiple poles, all of the poles would be significantly weaker than a strong dipole, north-south dipole.
Yeah, they're so weak that it affects our magnetosphere. It affects the amount of radiation coming in, and that's when the bad news happens.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need a full polarity reversal to get bad effects, to
No,
get
not at
mass
all.
extinctions. In fact, we have the evidence we're going to show you here that the Lechamp, even the Gothenburg excursion, which occurs during the Younger Dryas event,
Mhm.
very weak excursion, but there's still mass extinctions.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
whether that is related to increased cosmic rays and UV or another catastrophe, which we've speculated about, maybe a giant impact and subsequent impacts or something like that. But so let's discuss real quick a general overview of what happens during these excursions. The first thing that can happen in our technological world is we could see damage to technology. A magnetic excursion could destroy electronic devices like satellites, home appliances, wireless devices, could disrupt power grids and communication systems, potentially costing trillions of dollars in damages. And to deal with the extra radiation, low orbit satellites and surface infrastructure on Earth would need to be redesigned because it's currently not designed for anything that's coming. And what I mean by coming is increased energy into our planet. Power grids, pipelines, and railways would need to be protected from these geomagnetically induced currents flowing through the Earth, especially during solar storms. So what we just saw with the superstorm of 2024 in May was aurora to the equator, and it wasn't that big of a storm. We did get to KP9, but it wasn't even as strong as the 2003 storm, which knocked out a few things, but certainly didn't see the same amount of aurora.
No.
So what we're definitely seeing is some of the effects of the weakening magnetosphere.
Yeah.
And the weaker it gets, the more damage to technology. The more superstorms we have, the more failures we'll see. I don't think it's going to be one big boom. It could be. It could be if a foreign entity shoots off an EMP device, then the grid goes down.
Sure.
But I think go ahead.
As you and I have discussed too, some of this is about duration too, right? So if the recent superstorm that we had that been going on for a longer period of time, if there had been more sort of pulsing electricity through the whole system, we would have seen a lot more damage. That just didn't happen.
Exactly. So the Carrington event lasted for days.
Yeah.
Meaning the solar storm lasted for days. The aurora could be seen all night for day after day for 3 days, even down towards the equator in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think is the next large flare event or solar storm that we have that's equivalent to the last one, as we see more and more of the magnetosphere waning and our field strength weakening, we're going to see more of this infrastructure damage. We'll see some satellites re-entering. Maybe the news will try to cover it up, maybe not. We'll definitely see some blackouts or some things, bad things happening, especially with the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you have first to go is going to be navigation, because we use satellites for that. So if you fry these navigation satellites, it starts to affect the infrastructure on the planet as a whole.
Right. And then one of the other things in that is what is it? The GPS timing signal or whatever that gets affected in here. So even if a navigation satellite doesn't go out, that timing signal tends to mess with devices' ability to sort of connect to those systems.
And we're about to show you how fast the North Pole has moved since the 1800s. It will blow your mind if you've never seen a simulation, how fast it's moving and how fast it's been moving in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
It moved so fast in the last 10 years that the world magnetic model had to update before its normal update.
Mhm.
This was because navigation was becoming difficult up in the high latitudes.
Mhm.
Ships were off by hundreds of miles,
Mhm.
which is very bad if you're trying to conserve fuel, let's say.
Yeah. And the normal update is only like every 5 years, right?
Yes, once every 5 years.
So that timing is going to have to, I mean, given that the rate of movement is exponential, that timing is going to have to increase substantially year after year.
It's actually is more variable than you think. It
Okay.
has been increasing the speed of the pole, but in the last year or so, it's actually decreased.
Mm.
It's still moving quick.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so we have all of the damage to technology and infrastructure possible. This is going to occur during solar storms, not just a weak magnetic field. So we're going to need a big solar storm to come in as the field is weakening, and then we're going to get these technological effects. Now, all the while, we're going to be seeing disorientation for animals. We've started to see this at least 10 years ago with tons and tons of different types of whales and animals beaching, and scientists are baffled.
Right.
And the worst thing is that we may not be able to go outside during the day because of increased solar radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Magnetic excursions can expose the biosphere to increased levels of solar and cosmic radiation, which could potentially lead to environmental disturbances, increased cancer rates. According to National Geographic, the atmosphere below the stratosphere could help act as a shield. I don't know how that works.
Mm. I mean, the other thing that is at play here that both the 2021 paper that we're going to talk about and the 1971 paper talk about is that that these magnetic changes can also result in climatic changes as well.
Yes, indeed. Now, many scientists, even when I was in academia, said that for years there's no relationship, no connection between reversals and excursions and mass extinctions or the climate. No connection. And I don't know why that was their position, because it doesn't make any scientific sense.
No, not at all.
The variable sun is what controls the heat on Earth.
Right.
But yet still today, this new pseudoscience field called climate science does not recognize the sun as what is heating our Earth. That's insane.
Right.
That is insane.
Well, and then the other irony in here is that it would seem that one of the major mechanisms for climatic change via electromagnetic change disturbance is depletion of the ozone layer, right, which is going to let heat escape. So, I mean, given the ozone hole scare in the past and global warming now, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, but the destruction of the ozone, the temperature is not the critical factor. With no ozone, you start to get UVC coming to the surface. So increase UVA, UVB.
Right.
That's going to mean if you stand in the sun unprotected, your skin will fry.
Yes.
It also may cause mutations. And this is one of the leading drivers of what Robert Felix latched on to years ago as the driver of evolution. Yeah. It's not Darwinian evolution, it's the sun.
Yeah.
All right, so and also, so all this information that we're talking about is all coming in the last 2 decades. When prior to that, scientists didn't believe that these magnetic reversals or excursions did anything. In fact, the position was that the reversals took thousands of years and that they were hardly noticeable. The only problem with that is with new studies, the more you look, the more you find. And just north of a truck stop along Interstate 80 in Nevada is a place called Battle Mountain. And there is evidence that the Earth's magnetic field went haywire. In fact, it showed a 58-degree shift in a single day. That is insane.
Wow.
That means the pole going from the North Pole to the equator in 18 hours.
I don't understand how you track that, though. How do you get data resolution that's high enough to see that?
It was in a lava flow that has high resolution, datable material. And it's a more recent lava flow. And it just so happened that this volcano erupted one day and then again the next day.
Right, right.
And it is erupting very regularly in these sheets of perfectly locked in magnetites that show the magnetic field at that moment.
Yeah.
We'll just read what they have to say here. One particular flow caught the scientists' attention because it seemed to carry a complex magnetic history. This lava, Bouge says, that's probably the author, initially started to cool, and then it was heated again within a year as fresh lava flow buried it. The fresh lava remagnetized the crystals within the rock below, causing them to reorient themselves a whopping 53 degrees at the rate the lava would have cooled. So that's how they know. They know the cooling rate.
Okay.
That's what they based it on. That would mean that the magnetic field was changing direction at approximately 1 degree per week. Okay, so this is a little longer time frame.
Yeah, this is not a 18 hours.
Little longer time frame. Not all experts are convinced by the work here. A paleomagnetist at Rutgers University in Piscataway, New Jersey, I love to say that, says it would be a curious coincidence to have two brief lava flows just happen to cool and capture a 53-degree change in direction when reversals happen only a few times per million years. That guy is so off base.
That's not a reason to reject the evidence.
Well, he's so off base because let me just pull up this graph. This is the magnetic field strength in just 300,000 years.
Yeah.
And it goes back and forth all the time. It's not in a million-year time scale.
Well, it's also not on a schedule.
There's literally shifts up and down in hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So apparently these scientists don't get the memo.
Yeah.
Now, real quick, let's watch this video. We'll describe it to you. It's going to show the movement of the North Pole in recent time.
I can't hear anything.
Okay. So in the late 1800s, the pole was moving at a mere 9 miles per year, and it increased to over 40 miles a year as it's accelerated towards the present. You could see the distance on this, that it moved in just 17 years. Absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
And so something big is afoot, and it's basically all the evidence we need that we are in the next excursion. Now, what are the implications? I shared you this article, Upheaval and Extinctions Linked to Magnetic Reversals 42,000 years ago. Just like the Battle Mountain site where they've got lava that they're speculating records the magnetic field on Earth, what they uncovered was a kauri tree, a tree that was alive during this excursion. And inside of the tree, obviously, you can do all kind of dating. And what they specifically were looking for was beryllium-10, because this beryllium tends to rain down on Earth when the magnetic field is exceptionally weak. It's how we date magnetic excursions, magnetic reversals, and other cosmic events. We use beryllium.
They also looked at radioactive carbon-14 in this as well.
Yeah, there were several proxies they looked at, but what was most astonishing to me was the multiple beryllium-10 spikes over the period of the reversal or the excursion. It wasn't a reversal because even though the polarity reversed for this short period, it went back to normal. Yeah, it went back to normal. How many years?
Yeah, 300 years roughly.
Okay. But during the entire event, as the field strength gets lower and then recovers, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 beryllium-10 spikes. So what is that showing?
It's showing that the magnetic field is very weak during this time period, and we're getting a lot of radiation from space.
But there's a cycle inside of the cycle, hundreds of years. This could be the grand minima cycle, every two or 400 years of the sun getting stronger and weaker.
Yeah, and they do talk about that in this paper, that grand solar minima, I think they're even talking about sort of 2 of them in succession, contributed in this situation.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing when all this information starts to come together.
I know, right? Some of the correlations that they showed in this paper are so interesting. Like if you look at, where is it? Well, maybe I'm thinking of the other. No, figure 4. You start to see all of these correlations between climatic changes and weather patterns and extinctions, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff going on in this time frame, right at the point where the polarity seems to be reversed.
Yeah, all of these weak field strengths, what they started to find was it had an ice age signal.
Yeah.
Major glaciers in Argentina are growing 41,500 years ago. We have the rapid expansion of the Laurentide ice sheet. So weak field strength equals cold. Why do you think that's happening?
Because it correlates with grand solar minima as well.
Right. So increased cosmic rays.
Mm-hmm.
What do we now know through the cloud experiment? Cosmic rays make it cloudy.
Yeah.
And if you have a cloudy Earth, it's cold underneath the clouds.
Yeah.
Let's do a thought experiment. Is it warmer on a sunny day or a cloudy day? We should have
brilliant thought experiment.
We should have all the climate scientists in one room, and that's how we start.
Right.
So we're in the next magnetic excursion with increased cosmic rays. How many cosmic rays is it increased? Well, the highest cosmic ray level ever recorded was back in 2010, the cosmic ray maximum. The second highest was in 2020. These are the minimas between solar cycles.
Mm-hmm.
The minimum we're going into will probably be the highest cosmic ray flux ever recorded in modern times. That's just my opinion. Yep. Another interesting thing to note, look over here on the left of the Oahu chart. This is the spike from the superstorm, May 11th of this year. It drove cosmic rays up to incredible levels seen at the solar minimum in an instant. And then they recovered. They went way down, and now they're coming back to normal here.
Interesting.
So it actually spiked up to above 4, right? You see it there?
Mm-hmm.
Which is up here.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. So huge event there. Okay, let's get back to this paper. Any other points that you wanted to talk about here? Because we're going to get into the more specific paper that has the better graphs with that shows the mass extinctions in Australia.
The 1971 paper or the Quaternary paper?
The Quaternary paper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that really struck me reading this paper is you've got many things going on at once, like the correlations that we were just showing a minute ago. And so in terms of the impact on biological life, it seems pretty clear to me now that there's multiple impacts, right? You've got the excess radiation, which is going to contribute to extinctions and mutations. Then you also have the change in climate that is occurring around the world in different ways, which also will impact the ability of biological life to survive and continue on. And then you also have the what's the right word? There's a word for it. Like I'm just going to say biomagnetic. That's not really the right term, but the biomagnetic effect, where you have lots of creatures that are depending on a magnetic field to guide them in their navigation. And there's actually now some great research showing, how this works. But those animals are going to be affected as well in terms of where they're migrating and their ability to get to where they need. So you've got all kinds of things going on that are going to impact the survival of different species. And every species seems to have a greater or lesser ability to adapt to this. So some species will go away. Some species will mutate, it would seem. Some may make it as they are.
Yeah, and in the geologic record, when you're looking at the paleontology and you see these lineages that move through time, they abruptly end, and on the other side of the boundary, there's all new species.
Mm-hmm.
So this is giving us a clearer picture of what happens as the cosmic rays are increasing and the radiation is bombarding Earth, causing death and destruction. At the same time, mutation. The entire biome is getting mixed up, and these mutated creatures that show up spontaneously in this new environment where they can thrive, they just stay there. And the old species that couldn't make it is gone. And so that might add more evidence to why this is happening so abruptly and give some credence to that punctuated equilibria idea coming out in the early 90s.
Yeah. Most certainly. And
that was Niles Eldridge and who else? One other guy. Google it.
Was it Dawkins? Was Dawkins part of that? I can't remember.
It'll come to me. So we've got this global environmental crisis 42,000 years ago. This is the most recent comprehensive paper on this type of topic, 2021. So in a few years, we should be seeing something come out, some better information. This was launched after they found this Corey tree. Mm-hmm. And so that was a recent discovery. I believe it was in a mud bog, anoxic environment for 42,000 years, and then they just dug it up, and there's a tree.
Well, and it was a really fortuitous discovery, too, because this is a tree that lived for like 1,700 years, something like that. It happened to get preserved in this bog. How fortunate is that? And the result is that it provided some really high resolution data about what was going on with the magnetic field at the time.
Yeah, because if you don't know, trees have annular rings. And so there is a very high resolution data set on that Corey tree.
Yeah, I just want to back up for 1 second because I was going to say something a minute ago that I forgot and now I've remembered. The 1971 paper, this is regarding, the effect on biological organisms, kind of makes the very good point at one point in the paper that it's almost as if, and they don't say this, but it's almost as if these magnetic excursions and reversals kind of provide like a biological reset. So had any of these reversals or extinctions gone on for any longer than they have, you would have more and more. The longer we have a period of stability in the magnetic field, the more and more species you're going to have that are going to disappear post excursion and reversal. So it's kind of interesting to think about, right? Because that period of stability gives you a period of time to accumulate all of these organisms that require a strong magnetic field to survive. So it's kind of interesting in that respect.
Yeah, so the paper in 71 was looking at radiolaria.
Yeah.
They're also referred to as radiozoa. These are protozoa of tiny diameter, 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters, that produce intricate mineral skeletons. And these are used in high-resolution dating of sediments because they are pervasive and they show up all over the oceans at different periods. So they're really good as biomarkers. So sometimes if you're on land, you're looking for pollen because it gets preserved like this. But if you're in sea sediments or in ocean water sediments, you're looking for radiolaria. Paleontologists also use foraminifera. These are all different tiny microscopic creatures that you can look at quickly in a lab and identify a time period based on what you're looking at. Right there, radiolaria.
Yeah.
So a study back in 1971 of 28 deep sea cores from high and low latitudes show that during the last 2.5 million years, which is the Ice Age, 8 species of radiolaria became extinct. Now, prior to their extinction, These species were widely distributed and became extinct. This is important, isochronously. It's hard to say that word. Did you have trouble?
No, not really.
So isochronously simply means everywhere at the same time. How do you go extinct all over at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they looked into it. 6 of the 8 species disappeared in close proximity to magnetic reversals recorded in the sediment. The odds of this happening are 0.
Mm-hmm.
That it's an accident.
Mm-hmm.
So the probability of 6 out of 8 species extinctions showing this degree of correlation with reversals by chance is extremely small. And this, in 1971, launches Robert Felix's book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and they even find too, like, let's say out of those 8, like the 6 that went extinct all had sort of a similar structure. They had this more like elongated structure, whereas the 2 that made it had more of a round structure, just suggesting the possibility that certain of these radioli have an adaptation which allows them to survive a weak magnetic field, whereas the others don't. You know, there's a mechanism in there. It points to a mechanism in there somewhere.
Yeah, and I believe we even discussed a paper that was talking about hominid species, how Neanderthal was more susceptible to the magnetic excursion than Homo sapiens sapien.
I don't remember that.
It had to do with melanin in the skin or some gene.
Huh. Yeah, because
that protects
another
us from
question.
UVB, but not them.
Yeah.
We'll get to that if we have time.
Yeah.
But a big shout out, God rest his soul, Robert Felix. He came to LeCon. He sold out of all his books. He signed them for everyone for free. He gave us a couple copies. This book is now worth hundreds of dollars on Amazon. We should probably give away one of those copies at an event or something, raffle it off.
Yeah.
He was attacked immediately by the entire scientific community. If you go into his archived website and you read some of the comments 2011, and then you scroll through to the present, you see scientists in there that said, I called you a quack and I was wrong. Like they're all, as more and more papers come out corroborating everything that Robert said, I think he may rise up as an icon in the future. Hopefully, you can't find much stuff on him anymore, but hopefully people will start referencing him in the future.
Yeah.
He was one of the first to point out the fact that these magnetic reversals can happen overnight in just a few years without warning. He was pointing out that world governments knew about this. They're not telling anyone. In fact, to gain more understanding of our magnetic field, that's the claim, in 2010, the ESA, that's the European Space Agency, launched SWARM. These satellites are specifically to monitor the magnetic field. Why do you think that they spent all those millions of dollars?
Because the elites want to know when they need to go underground. That's why. And they're not going to tell the public about it because they can't do anything about it. They can't arrive as the saviors. So, you know, they can pretend to be the saviors of so-called climate change, right? You know, say, oh, we have to do all these things and we have to use EVs and solar panels and all of this stuff. And then meanwhile, just make bank on it.
Yeah, the Earth's magnetic field protects us from deadly cosmic rays. The powers that be know this. Deep underground military bases are real and for a purpose, not only nuclear war. And as the magnetic field strength decays, which it's now doing, cosmic radiation will get closer and closer and increase more and more. And according to Robert Felix, this radiation is what causes evolutionary leaps. Mm-hmm. There is data to support this. And huge mounds of data came from this paper in 2019. The role of geomagnetic field intensity in late quaternary evolution of humans and large mammals. It has been long speculated that biological evolution was influenced by ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth's surface. Despite imprecise knowledge from the timing of both UVR flux and evolutionary events, the past strength of Earth's dipole field provided a proxy for this UVR flux because of its role in maintaining the ozone. So they're using field strength to determine the amount of ozone as a proxy. They're not really measuring ozone. And so the timing of quaternary evolutionary events has become better constrained by fossil finds and radiometric dating. And well, this paper is the first to suggest that it's UV that is causing speciation and mass extinction, and it's occurring on these very low field strength intervals, like the Blake, the Lechamp, the Mono Lake, the Gothenburg excursion, all correspond to visible paleontological signs where there is mass extinction followed by new species. You can see it on almost all of the field strength fluctuations, especially when it dips low. The most significant is here, the Lechamp excursion that ended the Neanderthals and made us king of planet Earth.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that excursion, we may not have YouTube.
Oh, darn.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Well,
how would people get this information?
Right. And as been pointed out, and I think maybe we'll get more into this, but there's the proliferation of cave painting that occurs at the Lechamp as well, right? Like, so obviously you have Neanderthals and anatomically modern human beings at the same time spending more time in caves, which makes sense because if there's that much radiation, you're going to feel that when you're outside. Like you said, if the UV gets high enough, your skin fries during the day and you can no longer go outside. So it would help explain the explosion of cave paintings and the existence of cave dwellings all around the world. Whole underground cities, even in some places. It's not an accident.
Right. And a lot of it is happening between 41,000 and 32,000 years, which is all during this massive excursion event.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get to some of the specifics if we have time, because I think that not only does speciation occur on these intervals, I think that something jump-started. See, we had been around already prior to this excursion, humans. We just weren't painting in caves. There's no evidence of it. So it maybe the increased cosmic rays has something to do with our increased intellect.
Yeah.
Something on the Yuga cycle type idea where
Maybe.
there are these long scale cycles where we increase and decrease in intellect.
I still want to know, though, what really is the difference, let's say, in this respect, in terms of ability to deal with low magnetic field. What is the difference exactly between Neanderthals and anatomically modern humans? Like what? Because it is clear that we're both, sort of conditionally adapting by spending more time in caves. But why did we make it and ultimately Neanderthal did not?
Good question. About 40,000 years ago, mammalian fossils in Australia and Eurasia record an important die-off of large mammals that included Neanderthals in Europe. In the Americas and Europe, a large mammalian die-off appeared to have occurred 13,000 years ago. Both die-offs are linked to Earth's magnetic field strength, implying UVR flux variations in Earth's surface influenced mammalian evolution. So it's the UV. That's it.
I remember reading.
I mean, that's what they're claiming in the paper.
Yeah. It's interesting too, though, that the 2021 paper that we were looking at earlier also notes that there was also disappearance of some of the first European anatomically modern human cultures. So it wasn't so. The 2021 paper that we were looking at earlier also notes that there was some disappearance of certain anatomically modern human groups. at the same time. So we weren't adapting all that easily either.
Yeah, this goes on to say that for the last 200,000 years, estimates of timing of branching episodes in the human evolutionary tree from modern and fossil DNA and Y chromosomes can all be linked to minima in the field strength, which implies a long-term role for the UVR in human evolution.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's like the direct link between UV radiation and genetics.
New fossil finds, improved fossil dating, knowledge of past strength of Earth's magnetic field, which is increasing every year, and refinements in the human evolutionary tree are sharpening the focus on a possible link between UVR arriving at Earth's surface, the magnetic field strength, and events in mammalian evolution.
I mean, it's interesting too.
Robert
in the sense,
Felix nailed it. My goodness.
Yeah, he did. It's interesting too that there's an implication in here that it's not just, let's say, there's an increase in radiation and therefore there's an increase in cancer and then species die off. No, it's not like that. It's like, yes, species die off due to lack of adaptability and maybe there's cancer in there, but there's also change that improves adaptability as well. It's not all evolutionary change and genetic change for the worse. There's also genetic change for the better. So there's probably a lot of different mechanisms in the genetics going on here.
Yeah, and it could also be simple exaptation. If you've never heard of that term, when everything gets mixed up, we've got all this radiation coming in. There is a group of whatever's living in this area that has something that it wasn't using before that becomes advantageous in this new realm.
Yeah.
And the other creatures die off while this guy who is never really prolific, a new species is burgeoning so that they proliferate everywhere and they show up in the fossil record. They might have always been there, but it wasn't until this shift that their ecological niche came true and then they became king of the land. So, and that's what exaptation is. It's an accident.
Yeah.
It's just an accident that you're in the right place at the right time when something shifts and you've got something that is advantageous during that shift.
That's interesting. There might even be evidence for that in the 1971 paper when we get there.
Oh, you want to go back there?
Well, we could. I mean, I'm not exactly entirely sure yet, but
well, the exaptation you said would be just the shape, the accidental shape.
Right, but also I'm thinking about, so there's all of these graphs in this paper of the population numbers of the various radioli, and it's kind of interesting because in many cases there seems to be a phenomena where there's like there's a change in the magnetic field strength, and it maybe initially negatively affects the population numbers, and then things kind of stabilize for a while and the population explodes again, and then there's another shift and it just drops. It's almost as if, like, it reminded me of, you know how sometimes plants, when they're facing their death, will suddenly flower as if to try to prolong their own evolution?
Yeah. They try to make seeds.
Yeah, so it kind of reminded me of that, as if there's an attempt to use what you've got to kind of make it through the circumstances, but then the circumstances change again and then you're done.
Yeah, I can see that on this graph. There's a recovery at the end of the excursion events every time, huge spike here, and then it just drops off to nothing.
Yeah, yeah, but there's another shift that's happening at the end there, which I guess would be the reason why. So it's like for every shift, that's like there's a shift and then there's a decrease and then there's some ability to adapt in those new circumstances and the population takes off again. And then as soon as there's another shift, everything changes all over. So maybe in those population explosions, it's like that exaptation occurring.
Yeah, one small group hangs on for a while, but then it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. What are we going to do? Well, the good news is that this is, like we said, the magnetic field year after year is slowly weakening. So it's not going to just surprise us. Any effects that will occur will slowly occur. it'll be harder and harder to work during the day outside. And
Yeah.
we'll probably pattern ourselves to be inside more often during the day and go out at dusk or in the morning.
Yeah, and it's the same with like all of the species of animals that use magnetic fields to navigate. There's some awesome work from I think 2022 that proves, let's say for as an example, that salmon and trout actually have clusters of magnetite in their nose, and that it is affected by magnetic field strength. So it's like they were looking for the mechanism that allows animals to navigate this way, and they've definitively found it. It's interesting too because there's some other bacteria. What are they called? They're called magnetotactic bacteria that also produce these long chains of magnetite crystals. So it's interesting and part of the supposition of this paper is that this is a really, really, really old evolutionary adaptation that exists in many animals, but it all derives back from these bacteria. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and here's the paper, the paper, Conservation of Magnetite Biomineralization Genes in All Domains of Life and Implications for Magnetic Sensing. In the paper, they present a model of biogenic magnetite formation in eukaryotes.
Right.
And did they find that this was happening?
Yeah. It's there. I mean, they're the finding. They find the magnetite, right? We know of tons of species that have magnetite in their bodies that's being used. I mean, this is everything from like birds to fish to, I mean, we have it in our bodies as well, to bacteria. And obviously for these animals, if the magnetic field strength is weakening, then over time, it's going to start becoming more and more difficult for them to navigate using magnetic fields. So that's another slow change that will occur. And maybe some of those animals will adapt differently to be able to navigate in low field strength. I don't know.
Yeah, there's human health risks that will slowly increase. If you come look here at the geomagnetic score chart in the center, that would be what we will be experiencing as the magnetic excursion intensifies and the field weakens. We could see increase in acute myocardial infarction, cerebral stroke, terminal arrhythmia, anxiety, stress, emotional instability, cognitive diminution, an uptick in traffic accidents and work injuries, suicide risk, mental disorder flare-up, severe radiation risk if you're flying at high latitudes. I mean, at some point, we may have to ground flights, especially during geomagnetic storms.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
What were you going to say?
I mean, we already talked about this, but obviously also with a weakened magnetic field that's introduces a lot of navigation problems as well. The planes made me think of it.
Yeah, well, we're going to go straight back to the Stone Age. The first geomagnetic storm that's strong enough is going to take low Earth orbit satellites and fry them. And goodbye GPS, goodbye navigation, goodbye Earth as we know it. There could be local deliveries, but there'll be no computers or internet. Like, how are we going to do it? Mm-hmm. Back to pencil and paper. It's going to take a while to figure out how to get the milk to the store again.
Yeah. I mean, we've completely lost sight of how to operate just in a local and regional manner, which is our biggest downfall as a society, right? Like, I always like to use the example of monoculture agriculture, these giant agricultural operations that you can't just pick up and move as the conditions change. But if you're operating on a local and a regional level, you have a much greater ability to adapt. So it's going to be a hard transition.
But maybe something good will come out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Just like during the Lechamp magnetic excursion, all of a sudden we're stuck in these caves and we start painting.
Yeah.
Now, they thought the first painters 30 and 40,000 years ago were men, because caves are dark and scary and men would have to use a torch to go in there and it'd be very difficult and blah, blah, blah. They did an analysis here in Castillo cave, and they found out based on the size and length of the fingers that these are mostly female hands.
Well, and it's like, it's even more specific than that. It's like the ratio of the finger length to this palm, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Now, am I stuck in here? Yeah. So this is the cave of El Castillo, in case you don't know about it, or the cave of the castle. It's an archaeological site within the complex of caves of Monte Castillo in Puente Vesco, Cantabria, Spain. So the cave contains the oldest known cave painting, period. A large red stippled disc in the Panal de las Manos was dated to 40,000 years old using uranium thorium dating. So right around this magnetic excursion, maybe we're so bored in the caves, we have to come up with something to do because it just becomes insanely boring in there.
It's like, to me, it's not that unusual to think about it. I think human beings have an innate need to express things. So if you're stuck in caves, that's where the expression is going to land.
Yeah.
I think it's that simple.
And some of the oldest carvings ever found in a cave is the Lion Man.
Yeah.
And that is also during this glacial maximum high cosmic ray time.
Yeah. Yeah. What a weird time to live. I mean, if you have to spend your days in a cave and like, so literally like your days and nights are dark all the time. It could not have been easy.
Well, I'm sure during the day you moved towards the front of the cave where it was light, but you didn't go out into the direct sunlight.
Right. Right.
You might have tried hunting from the mouth of your cave because you still got to eat.
Yeah.
Any animal that walks by, you try to get.
Or otherwise you just hunt at night.
Yeah, you hunt at night or go check your traps. I think a lot of trapping was going on back in these times.
You know,
you've got to develop a hunting technique that works on its own.
Right, right. But it just occurred to me too that it kind of makes a lot of sense now too that you have largely women doing the cave painting, because probably what's happening is everybody's awake at night rather than during the day. Perhaps the men are out hunting, the women are still in the caves. So it makes sense that they're the ones doing the painting. They're the ones that have the time to do it.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So if you were worried about the earth flipping on its side, we didn't discuss that at all. Now, did we?
No.
But the problem is that we asked AI about what's going to happen, and it had no problem telling us that it could happen in the 2030s. It doesn't even say after that, but that's probably not going to happen. It says some scientists say it could happen in the 2030s. That's it. And that's bad news because there's no other explanation, but it's happening now. It's rapidly happening, and we could be at the weakest field strength in just 10 years.
Yeah. Yes.
So buckle up.
I will say, too, as a very fair-skinned person, that in the last 20 years, I've noticed a big difference in the rate in which I sunburn.
Yeah. Have you noticed similar changes in how hot, like driving down the road with the window open isn't even an option, like on some days?
Yeah, no, you and I were just talking about this last week, you know, like, okay, we've been in the middle of a bit of a heat wave here. And, you know, granted, this is a climate where it's sunny 300 days a year. We get an awful lot of solar, and we're up at altitude, 7,000 feet. We get an awful lot of solar radiation. But all of a sudden, last week, just being out in the sun, it wasn't the heat so much as it was the intensity of the sun. Like it just felt like you were being radiated.
Yeah, it wasn't
in a way
even
that
90.
I haven't noticed before.
It wasn't even 90 degrees, and it hurts.
Yeah, no, we were still down at like 80 at that point, and it felt in a certain way. It wasn't like, not temperature wise, but in a certain way, it felt like it was like 100.
When I was in my teens, we would go to Wildwood for spring break. I would slather baby oil across my whole body and lie on a towel for 6 hours straight. That would be an impossibility right now.
I'm partially laughing because if I ever did that at any point in my life, I would be black. I would be burnt to a crisp.
Yeah. No, I actually would get that tan, dark brown, if you put baby oil on.
Right.
Yeah. So we're looking for good tans in the future in very short periods of time. That means no more tanning salons, no more need. Just 5 minutes a day.
Yeah. Oh.
All right, guys. Don't get your panties in a bunch. You're in a magnetic excursion now, and you're not dead yet.
Find us tonight on Magnetic Reversal News at 8 p.m. Mountain Time.
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.